music sounded so good like this. Fabulous. Time to show, it's your time. You're nominated as the greatest, and you're flowing in your minds. Radio done rated, some outdated. The friends you know, you won't find. True life stages.
Good day, and welcome to the Washington Report. I'm Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, and I'm blessed to serve as the Virgin Islands delegate to the U.S. House of Representatives. The Washington Report was created to inform Virgin Islanders on current federal issues that directly affect our community. So today, we're in a very special place. We are actually in Rayburn House Office Building, and this is kind of like one of the Rotunda's meeting spaces. I'm honored to have as a guest today with me my good friend, Undersecretary of Rural Development at the United States Department of Agriculture, Xochit Torres-Small. Undersecretary Torres-Small was previously the Congresswoman for New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District, and we served together on the House Agriculture Committee. In her current role, she oversees loans and grants to provide infrastructure improvements, business development, affordable housing, community facilities such as schools, public safety, and healthcare, as well as high-speed internet, access to rural, tribal, and high-poverty areas. During her leadership, the USDA Rural Development secured $2 billion to support rural broadband through the bipartisan infrastructure law. In February, President Biden nominated Ms. Torres-Small as Deputy Secretary at the United States Department of Agriculture. So we are in great company today. We're going to get some great information, you guys, out of her today. So welcome to the Washington Report, Secretary Torres-Small.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Plaskett. It's a joy to be here and to see you again.
Thank you. How does it feel being back in the House?
It feels good.
Yeah?
I miss some of the work. I really miss getting to work with you in that capacity, but I'm so excited about the ways we get to work together now.
Very true, very true. And one of those ways that we got to work together is we were so grateful when you and your team came down to the Virgin Islands and spent time with us. We had the opportunity to host you at the Virgin Islands just over a month ago for meetings with stakeholders across various fields, including housing, energy, telecommunications, as well as farmers. We've had conversations around the takeaways from the trip to our territory, particularly on the topic of housing, energy, and communications. So how are the issues faced by the Virgin Islands in areas like housing, energy, and telecommunications similar or different than other rural areas around the United States?
Thank you so much for bringing me to the Virgin Islands. It was my first time visiting, and I just so appreciated the chance to see the realities on the ground and get to know what some of the similar challenges are and the unique opportunities that existed in St. Croix.
Does that happen often when you go and visit with other communities?
It absolutely does. What I've learned is that there's way more than just one rural, right? Everywhere you go, I have a sense of what rural in New Mexico is, but now getting to see what rural is like on an island, for example, or what rural is like in Alaska. There's all sorts of different challenges, and there's all sorts of different ways people are responding to them. So one of the things that really struck me about St. Croix is that people were having to plan so much for resiliency. So whether that was homes, making sure they had a place to store water, both for drought and for stormwater capture, or whether it was with energy, making sure there's a reliable energy source, and so investing more in solar in certain places, or even just the business and industry guaranteed loan project that we visited that convened that store. It was the business owner who was making sure that he was also had a strategy for how to make ice because that becomes a huge issue when there's power outages. So it struck me that folks are responding to the challenges on the ground by planning for what resiliency needs to look like in those cases.
My husband is always trying to tell the kids, prior planning prevents poor performance, right? I'm like, really? But in the Virgin Islands, it has to be done because of the climate that we're in, because of our isolation, our inability to go and get supplies in the way that maybe someone else can have it trucked in or something like that. USDA Rural Development has invested millions of dollars in the U.S. Virgin Islands, actually over $15 million in just the last fiscal year, with about 2/3 going to single and multifamily housing. Can you share your perspective on some of the effective ways you've seen funding challenges addressed in other rural areas to increase the success rate of USDA rural development programming?
Yeah, this is something we talked about while I was visiting, is that we've invested a significant amount when it comes to housing, but there are still real housing challenges.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've seen across the country is where folks have the ability to blend funds. So for example, I was in Kentucky recently, and they know that our programs, whether it's a more affordable mortgage or whether it's self-help programs, on their own, they don't always achieve what needs to be done.
Okay.
And so some nonprofits have figured out how to layer funding, starting with a HUD site preparation resources, and then maybe use our self-help funding to address some of the labor challenges, but couple that with workforce development funds from another entity. And then lastly, of course, using our mortgage to make the mortgage more affordable for the buyer. So that layering can really help, but it does take a lot of knowledge and experience, right? That technical support and expertise. Part of the reason I think Kentucky's been so helpful is because they received a Rural Communities Development Initiative grant that helps provide some of that capacity building.
Is that something that is regularly put out there for grants?
It's something that's regularly available, and would love to make sure your team has more information about it.
Okay, great. You know, it's so interesting because when I came to Congress and said I was going to be on the Agriculture Committee, of course you're thinking about farmers, livestock, fishing, but people don't really comprehend how vast the Department of Agriculture's reach is, as you were talking about in rural development with energy and housing, telecommunications, broadband, etc. That's all the responsibility and the support of USDA in rural areas. But of course, you guys also deal with farmers, right? And during our roundtable, we discussed methods that could be used to form cooperatives between farmers to apply for machinery and equipment acquisition funding. In isolated districts like the Virgin Islands, cooperatives serve as an effective management structure to direct resources and facilitate partnerships. Can you share your perspectives on opportunities and challenges that exist in the Virgin Islands agriculture sector and the ways in which cooperatives can advance farm communities as a whole?
You know, when it comes to the challenges, I think one of the things you said really struck me is how isolated the Virgin Islands are. And I've certainly seen that even just in the context of what resources, what technical assistance is available to farmers who might want to start a cooperative in the Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
Finding if there are any nonprofits or others who have experience working in the Virgin Islands can be a challenge. One of the most common resources I suggest to folks if they're trying to set up a cooperative is working with a nonprofit that's received assistance from us to help set up cooperatives.
Okay.
But there aren't any recipients in the Virgin Islands. So that's one of the challenges. In terms of opportunities, what I saw in the Virgin Islands is a really diverse set of farmers who are starting to show some interest in reviving the cooperative work there.
Right.
And both experienced farmers who've participated in cooperatives before and know the opportunities, but also some of the needs, the time that it takes to set one up. And then also new farmers who are really interested in starting new markets and leveraging that collective power to build support for more predictable markets.
Right.
So I think there's a real opportunity there, and happy if, as you identify folks who want to work together, because it does. Farming takes a lot of work, and then setting up a cooperative takes some more work.
Yeah.
But I'm eager to find potential partners who might help provide that assistance in setting up a cooperative, because that can open up so many more resources at rural development in terms of eligibility.
You know, I've thought about maybe we don't need to look at the traditional partners, right? So maybe it's a university, and maybe it's not a university in the Virgin Islands. Maybe it's one that have worked with other cooperatives in another rural area, isolated area. Or maybe it's, not necessarily a nonprofit, but a business venture that sees the opportunities of supporting the creation of a cooperative for value-added foods, or exporting goods at the end users. Or maybe it's even our Hotel and Tourism Association that has a need for these farmers to really supply farm-to-table foods, or the Department of Education, so that we can qualify for more food programs, for food support programs for young people. So I think that's really an interesting idea, that we need to think outside of the box about the regular ways. I had a conversation one time, we have only one certified organic farmer, and he talks about how so many Virgin Islands farmers are operating under organic circumstances, but they haven't gotten the certification. And part of the issue is, how do you get the certifier to come down, right? They need to spend time. You need to set aside and do reporting. So making the support systems through a cooperative that could allow so many of our farmers who are already doing it to actually get the stamp, so that they can have a different market available to them. We're so grateful for being able to work with you and your team. You guys have been really an incredible resource, I think. And you're correct, we have very mature farmers who've been doing this for a while and can tell you the ins and outs and what works and what doesn't work, and give you history, which is really important to understanding what were the pitfalls in the past. And I think the enthusiasm and the out-of-the-box thinking of the young farmers, if we compare them together, that'll be something that's really instructive and very, very helpful to people. Are there places that you've seen in the past that have been able to overcome some of these challenges? Do you have examples of where you've seen that?
Absolutely. I was in North Dakota and was
very different place.
Very different place. Very different place. But the challenges of how do you get folks who aren't as used to a cooperative model to get excited about it. And in North Dakota, the Rural Electric Cooperative receives funds to help set up other cooperatives. And that relationship is really interesting because they have a lot of experience with the community. They're a board already, so they're coming from the places that they serve, and so that helps create really interesting models. And one of the cooperatives that they helped set up was for childcare.
Oh, nice.
And so it created this response, this opportunity that otherwise wouldn't have existed.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's such a different, every place is different. And the level of isolation when it comes to being in the Virgin Islands makes the opportunity to collectively organize their power even stronger.
Yeah, I think the impact can be so much greater when you're in a small place like that. But I would think that, North Dakota, we think of it as very different topography or even, the climate. But I think places like North Dakota, which in many ways are also isolated, creates cultures that are similar, hesitancy and distrust and, implementation of new ideas and new thoughts are kind of slower to take hold, are similar in some respect. They're kind of also very monolithic, areas, or people are very similar to one another, like the Virgin Islands and like North Dakota. So maybe we need to go up to North Dakota or invite some of them down to the Virgin Islands. I'm sure they'd rather come down to the Virgin Islands where we could get some thoughts and, share ideas as well with them. But to sum up this part of our discussion, and with your trip in the Virgin Islands in mind, what are the things our territory seems to be doing well? And what are 2 or 3 top line next steps that you'd like to share with us?
So what I was so impressed with is just how much people are willing to give their time for the betterment of the Virgin Islands, whether it was a business owner or whether it was farmers who would take, as busy as they are, take time to have a conversation, whether it was even our own rural development employees who love the place they live and are so dedicated to it. I just, and
shout out to Kimmy.
Shout out to Kimmy. And whether it, I found that everywhere we went, sometimes we ended up seeing the same people because they're always signing up to do the work. And I think that's a real strength. The other piece that I mentioned in terms of strengths was this willingness and this knowledge that you've got to plan ahead. And I saw that especially in the telecommunications space. So I was really excited to see the level of planning that's got into trying to get high-speed internet to everyone in the Virgin Islands. And that's important to me. One of my former staffers when I was in Congress was from the Virgin Islands. And occasionally she would work when she was visiting family there. We always knew when that was happening because the internet was not as reliable.
Right.
And I think about the opportunity to bring back people who love their home and want to stay in the Virgin Islands, but need to have that resource. So that's some of the challenges, are making sure that we're strong partners in providing that technical assistance, right? How do we stack home financing funds better? Or how do we help with building a cooperative? And where are the partners in the region who have that island expertise that can support those next steps?
Cool, very cool. So one of the things that I like to do with guests, I have some young folk on my team, and they want us to not just talk about the subject matter as well. A shout out to Shama on this one, to share a little bit about themselves as we wrap up each episode. So can you share a little about your experience as a Congresswoman from the perspective of serving on the Agriculture Committee, and how that's helped or hurt or changed the role that you take to being the Undersecretary at Rural Development?
Well, I loved getting to serve on the Ag Committee with you, and you were such a great subcommittee chair.
Oh, thank you.
One of the things that I really appreciated in the committee was how you end up getting to work as much regionally as you do in other divides, right? So it's not always about parties. Sometimes it's about, we both care about specialty crops. Let's talk through that. Or, research will really define the next generation of farming and farm workers and ag employees. So how do we help invest in research? So I so appreciated the chance to get to find ways to work with anyone through the Ag Committee, and that certainly served me at USDA as well. The other piece about having served in Congress is that I really respect the work that you do and know that my role is different, right? So as we go into Farm Bill conversations, for example, as Congress makes those decisions, thinking about what information we can supply as the ones who'll be charged with implementing it.
Right.
And how do we make plans for that in the meantime?
Very good. So now we're going to get a little more personal. I love reading, and I also am really into movies as well. I try to watch series. My husband does. I thought I had a short attention span. As soon as he sees me watching something and he's like, "Is this a series?" I don't know if I want to commit to, 10 episodes of this. No. And no, a limited series maybe, but not those 2 and 3 season ones. But, I have been a follower of Billions and Succession, some of the Power series as well. But I'm also an avid reader. I love reading historical. I'm a real history buff. What is maybe something that you've watched on Netflix or TV that you really loved, or a book that you've read that you want to share with everyone?
Well, in terms of TV, I just have to say I'm a real Ted Lasso fan.
But the second season wasn't as good as the first to me. Or do you think we just got used to it?
Well, so that's what I was going to say. If your husband isn't as into the whole long season thing, you could just watch the first season and get so much joy out of that, and recognize that it's not all about winning. It's about how you show up to the game.
I don't know about all that. I like to win.
So I think.
But
that
it is. I hear you.
Just do it as one season. Although I'm still enjoying it.
Did you watch it during the pandemic, or did you watch it after?
At the very end of the pandemic and coming out of it. So I was late to the game. I did not believe all the hype, but I'm really grateful. It's a
beautiful series. It is.
It gives people permission to be very truly themselves and to explore and dive into the awkward but best parts of ourselves.
Is there an awkward part of you?
Yes. I think the biggest awkward part about me is I express my nervousness by just forgetting everything. My keys, my PIV card, my test, everything. I just forget it.
Mm-hmm. And any books or anything?
So, just recently I finished reading Michael Lewis's Fifth Risk.
Really?
Yeah, it's an older book.
So he's the guy who wrote Liar's, Poker and all that stuff, right?
Yes, and then he wrote something on COVID, right? Premonition or something. I haven't read other books, but Fifth Risk is really good. It's about the federal government. It's about all of the things that happen that we just take for granted and why the agencies matter. And so coming in as a political appointee, I came in realizing that there were folks who'd worked for rural development longer than I'd been alive. And what this book does is it tells those stories. So for example, at NOAA, all of the work that they do to make information available for weather prediction and all sorts for everyone, right? Or the work that the Coast Guard is doing, creating a new model that helped them save people faster. All of these things that we don't know but happen to serve our country and to make it better.
I know when I was a political appointee at the Justice Department, some of the career people, there was one guy who he had come to the Justice Department as an honors program graduate from law school, and he was hired by Robert Kennedy. And he was still there. And after September 11th, he had to use a BlackBerry. And he started using it, and he was like, if I had realized that I could convert to the tech space, I would have left this job long ago. But that wasn't true. But I remember the people like him would always call us the Christmas help, because we're here for a short while, but they have that continuity of experience and the know-how that keeps all of the federal government moving all the time, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
So, we were so happy to have you in the Virgin Islands, and you walked on the waterfront with us when a cruise ship came in and got to see some of the smaller businesses. I saw that you purchased something. What did you get?
Oh my goodness, I got some of the preserves. So I was looking for the tamarind preserve. I didn't
They
get
had run
that.
out.
They had run out, and so we ended up getting, is it the sour berry?
The sour sop.
Sour sop, excuse me, the sour sop, which was wonderful.
It was that good?
Yes, incredible.
Okay, I like the tamarind preserve also. And I like it when it's a little more spicy, the hot rather than the sweet. And I do not like sweet and sour. Like I can't take that taste. I like salt and sweet or sweet and, spicy.
Tamarind has all sorts of interesting connections. So I know it from Mexico, right?
Yeah.
And being on the border there, it's a big tamarindo, which is this great sweet tamarind drink. But my husband is married to someone from Kerala, from India, and they love tamarind, and they have this great tamarind chutney. So I'm just getting all the tamarind flavors from across the world.
But now in New Mexico, it's always about the green chili.
Absolutely.
Right? And what is the genesis of that? I don't understand that one.
Oh, I'm taking it for granted. I mean, it is one of the 4 food groups. I have a freezer full of game and green chili.
And green chili?
Just for that. It's for venison and green chili.
And what are the ways that you've used green chili?
Oh, on everything. So if you want, an enchilada, you can put it on that. If you want sopa, we'll put it in the soup. But also just on a cheeseburger. It is so good on a cheeseburger. Yeah, I've had green chili lasagna. I mean, green chili mac and cheese, you've got to go for that.
Oh, now that sounds good.
There we go.
That sounds
all sorts
good.
of ways.
When you talk about that, you come from a multi-ethnic family, right? How is that? How do you blend that?
Oh, that's such a fun question. It is, I think growing up, it was a challenge, right? How do you lean into your identity, recognizing that you represent a lot of different people's histories and backgrounds? My grandparents immigrated from Mexico on my dad's side. My dad's first language was Spanish, but then growing up, he chose not to teach me Spanish because he faced all of the discrimination, in school and being told not to speak it.
That happens a lot of times, yeah.
And then my mom was a minister's daughter and grew up all around the country. My grandparents eventually settled in Colorado, and so I grew up spending summers with my aunt and uncle on their ranch. And
is it correct that you're Lutheran?
It is, yes.
Which is what I am.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, at one time was the official church it is the official church of Denmark and was the predominant church in the Virgin Islands.
Oh, I did not realize
Right,
that.
because of the Danish ownership.
Oh, that makes.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting is my husband and I found the Lutheran Church. My mom grew up Methodist, and we just come from a long line of women who have searched for faith and found their own homes. And for me, it was at Peace Lutheran in New Mexico, recognizing that everyone learns their faith or sees their faith differently, and it was the right home for us.
You know, we, my husband and I, we have dual church membership at our home church in Christiansted, at the church there, Lord God of Sabaoth Lutheran Church, but then also at the church that's right behind the Supreme Court, Reformation Lutheran as well, which has a range of incredible social justice programs as well, that we love being part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, you know, engaged in that. But being in the Virgin Islands, you know, what was one of the really bright spots, interesting, fun things that you did or experienced?
So interesting was just getting around. I have just a great...
The left side, the left side.
I have a great team member who was driving, and she picked up the car the night before, and she did such a great job. Shout out to Rebecca. I never felt at risk. But I did, the closest I felt that the night after when we ate at Kim and Frank's place. It was just such a beautiful restaurant on the hill, a club,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And incredible food, but we stayed for so long, it was dark, and I was a little nervous about coming back. And Rebecca did a stellar job staying to the correct side of the road. Staying on the left, not the right side.
Kat and Frank are some of my favorite restaurateurs on St. Croix. My husband and I were part of their advertising when we were young couples. You know, I had locks back then, and we would always hang out at the bar. But they've just really evolved and done so many interesting things. And they do really try to do farm to table in their work. And so many of the restaurants on St. Croix do that. I think that's, one of the great things of the restaurants on St. Croix. But I always found that it's the turn is when you have the maybe potential difficulty with the staying on the left. But in the Virgin Islands, we always try and be a little different. We can't just be just regular. We always got to keep it a little different. And I think the left is part of our, our left brain thinking, maybe a little bit down there. But we're grateful to have you, and I'm glad you enjoyed the food.
Oh, yeah, Kat and Frank did an incredible job.
And I'll have to bring maybe some green chilies down for them and see what they can do with that.
There we go. We've got a plan.
Good.
Thanks so much.
Well, I want to thank you for being here with us and being part of the Washington Report. Thank you for being a great friend. Thank you for electing to serve your country, as whether you're a member of Congress or as a political appointee, member of the president's cabinet, and all the things that you do. It's really important that we have young people like yourself who are willing to step out of themselves and give, because I know that you being here in Washington is not as wonderful as being in New Mexico, where your home is. So thanks for that. And thank you for joining me on the show and for spending time in the Virgin Islands. And Virgin Islanders said that you were great, and they'd love for you and your team to come back, and they won't ask you any questions. You can enjoy and fet with us during any of the carnivals or festivals that we have going on, okay?
Congresswoman, thank you so much for being such a great friend and mentor.
Thank you. And to all my Virgin Islanders, I just want you all to stay VI strong and have a great day.